No tea. It's time.
Forgot to grab my tea. I'm gonna do it when you're talking, or I'm gonna sneak behind you. Welcome. Good evening. We're glad you're joining us tonight. This is episode 209, and the topic title is Peace Possible. Many of you can probably guess why that would be a relevant topic for right now. We've just finished our elections here in the United States, and boy, the post-election media and headlines is what inspired this topic in the first place. As I'm looking at, the United States on the Republican side, no holds barred bashing the Democrats, and there being this, you rub it in your face attitude, and it's not surprising that would be the case, because that was the case beforehand. There's just constantly back and forth at each other. But the thing that caught my attention was now, and again, this isn't surprising, but it just caught my attention because of how quickly it happened. Democrats, I've been seeing tons of stuff from Democrats bashing Democrats and blaming, and they should have done this, and you did that, and you guys are this, and it's like, dude, talk about polarization and division, and it's to me personally, it's been kind of scary. It's like, dude, our country's crazy, and I'm not, this is not a political podcast per se, but it is in the context of the political arena, mainly because that's where you see kind of the big picture of society and the issue of peace and agreement and social health for any nation. You're going to see it play out in the political arena, or after things happen in the political arena. And so the interesting thing is the term you'll hear, you don't really hear it very much anymore because it's not really a thing, but the term bipartisan is a very interesting word, and to without trying to go into the whole definition and history and stuff like that. The idea is that two opposing parties or diverse parties can compromise for the good of a society. That's what bipartisan is supposed to accomplish. That's the idea of it. Some interesting reads in your own time. Read about the social contract theory. Kind of interesting idea there. Another thing called the Two Treaties of Government. This is by a guy named John Locke. And the idea is that government has a responsibility to protect basic social human rights of life, liberty, and property. And the idea is that that's why the government is there. It's there to protect these freedoms or rights of every person, not just one party over another. And I was reading, I've never actually read the whole thing, and I'm reading through it because it's like 16 pages long and it's very deep. But George Washington's farewell address in his last term, he makes this statement. I'm only going to read this small portion of it, but he says, "The alternate domination of one faction over another," in other words, one party ruling over another. And he says these words are what kind of caught my attention here: "Sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetuated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism." And so basically what he's saying is a country is going to come to complete ruin and tyranny if one party, especially in the spirit of revenge, is able to rule over another.
Yeah.
And so what you have is a perfect atmosphere for division and war. And what led to the Civil War is this very thing, and it's like there's something very dynamic happening in the United States right now, and you can actually see it all over the world. There's war everywhere, and there's disagreement everywhere, and so the topic of peace seems only necessary to talk about. And so let's just talk about peace in general. The main question I have tonight is it possible to live at peace with people you disagree with? How do we handle disagreement? Where is the balance between the only word I can think of is civility and differences? How do you stay civil when you disagree? And this applies across the board, Christian, non-Christian. There are so many different things that we could talk about. But there's a scripture that came to my mind when I was studying for this, and it's in Romans 15, 5 through 7. This is Paul talking to a church, and he says, "Now may the God who gives endurance and encouragement grant you harmony with one another in Christ Jesus, so that with one mind and one voice you may glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ." And then here's the part that you should hold on to. "Accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring glory to God." So there's an ultimate aim, but then he says, "As Christ, perfection embodied, accepted you, frail, evil, far from perfect, sinful by nature, he accepted us," right? And so there's a lot to talk about there, but let me just throw out the what is peace question. What is peace really? What does peace really look like?
Well, for me personally, peace is when everybody just does what I say. That's when things are the most peaceful. The truth is that's what most people think peace is.
Yeah.
Listen, if you just do things my way, everything will be fine. So it's difficult, to try to talk about what you're talking about here in terms of, because peace has to be, I don't think there needs to be a definition for peace. I think everybody understands what peace means just in general. The thought that came to my mind when in your intro was that really the problem, because that was the key thing in George Washington's speech, was the idea of revenge.
Yeah.
And that's been, so what's been happening lately, the last 4 years, has been a revenge government. And, that with the Republican side of things to take back power, and the Democrat side wielding power. And so you have these, and for the most part against each other.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a lot of focus on helping people. And I think that's why we saw such a radical change. I lived in England. I lived in England for 10 years. And, having lived in those countries, both of them are very, even though their governments and their ideologies are very, very different from each other, people in power behave the same way. It just doesn't matter. And people who are governed behave the same way. Is when things aren't going the way we want them to go, we vote for the other party. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is. It's just, that's just all there is to it, is when our party's letting us down, we vote for the other party. When the party that's in charge, whether it's our party or not, is letting us down, then we vote for the other party. And so that's what we're seeing is, it's funny to see, compared to the last election, how many Republicans were voted in. And the reason is just simply the desire for change. Mm-hmm. But it says something that when a nation can swing between two political parties, like I said, England's the same way, is it really does show how out of touch the governing parties really are, with what people really want, because they don't want your style, they don't want your style of government. They don't hold to your ideology. And it's how badly the government has lost touch with the common people. Generally speaking, I'm not just talking, Republican or Democrat, and one's better than the other. They all have lost touch with the people.
Yeah.
And so when this is where I'm leading into something with this, is the idea of peace. When you're talking about peace, it's the ability to see the big picture, and that's the problem is that neither side is seeing a big picture. They're looking at it. They're looking at what can we do, with what power we have. They're not looking at the big picture of how things can, be better for other people. And so the reason why you mentioned a minute ago about God making peace with humanity. Well, how did he make peace with humanity? It wasn't compromise.
Yeah.
It was big picture, being able to see the big picture, because nothing's changed fundamentally as far as human nature. So you go through, thousands of years in reading the Old Testament and all the stupid things that people do, and good decisions, bad decisions, same kind of, we want a king, that we don't want this king, we want something else, and classic stuff. And then Jesus comes to the earth, dies on a cross to give us eternal life, but yet nothing's actually changed, in terms of the fundamentals of humanity. Nothing has changed. And the reason is because it's God. The change is God providing opportunity that wasn't there before. It's not that God did something to humanity that changed humanity. It was that God did something that gave humanity the opportunity for something better.
Yeah.
And that really is the issue when it comes right down to it, is the something better. And the idea of peace, really, and can disagreeing people be at peace? Yes, but they have to agree on something better. There has to be a bigger picture in order to be able to have peace. Because peace doesn't come through compromise, and that's a misnomer that is thrown out a lot. Is that like we have the big push, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, yeah.
Is this whole idea is that if we just compromise, everybody will be happy. But if you think about it, the amount of compromise that is required in order to be largely inclusive means that nobody's technically going to be happy. Nobody. And when you're considering the workplace, and that this was a big ongoing thing between was it Mark Cuban and Elon Musk about diversity and inclusion, and the realities are that you don't hire people for their diversity. You hire people for their expertise. And so if somebody's expertise fits in a particular position, they're the right person, regardless of other things, whether that's, gender or race or any of those other things. And so if you want to put aside the idea of qualification, and expertise, if you want to put aside the point of expertise, what you're left with is you're left with, in order to have, this whole diversity, equity, inclusion thing, then what you have is you have a bunch of people who have no idea what they're doing. They're there and it looks good, but they don't know what they're doing. It's just an opportunity for people to understand people that are not like them. And, that's the wrong way of going about things. You're talking about turning something possible into something utterly impossible, which is the idea of getting to know people. You can't get to know people in an environment where everybody's failing. Because you're not really getting to know people if everybody's failing. And so this idea that, because I highly doubt that I know there are those that are genuinely prejudiced, but for the most part, I think the problems that we have are not to do with the skin color or gender. It has to do with expertise. And that's the issue, is do you have the expertise? And if you have the expertise, then okay, if you want to talk about trying to bring up people from the bottom, that's a whole nother thing. But you're not going to bring people up from the bottom using, the whole DEI thing. That's not going to, because you're not going to bring them up. You're just throwing them in at the deep end, because they're not being brought up. If you want to help people that are poor, you want to help people that lack skills, then they need training. They need to be put in other environments where they can grow. Not by throwing them in the middle of some political war that's going on. So all those things that I just mentioned, you can see how that's a recipe for lack of peace, not peace. It's not going to bring peace. It's going to bring disharmony, because you have to compromise your desire to work for a successful company. When your focus is on the things that are not part of what makes the company the company. If it's a social club, and that's all it is a social club. Well, of course, then the more diversity, the better. The more equity, the better. The more inclusion, the better, because it's just a social club. But not everything is a social club. And so that's where the problem comes in, is when you talk about peace and having peace from the standpoint of making everything into a social club, that's not real peace, because the world is going to fall apart.
What is that?
What?
It's not peace. What is it? What does it become?
What, have the world? The whole world is a social club?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, the whole world wouldn't be a social club.
Yeah, we're going to need aliens to fly in and take care of us. Because we're not going to be able to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not going to build anything.
Yeah.
And it's regressive. It's not progressive. It's regressive to be focused on equality and diversity and inclusion and all those kind of things. It's regressive, because progress is achievement. And so we need to look past those things in order to have achievement, but you cannot sacrifice achievement for it. And so that's the imbalance that we're seeing, and that's what we've been seeing for many years in our government, has been this push for equality, and it's just equality, and it's Republican and Democrat, it's the all equality, making sure that women are paid as much as men, and that there's a quotas, race quotas are being met. And so you're not helping those people, because you're putting them in an environment that either they fail or the environment fails.
Yeah. Because you're not keeping the standard at a certain
Well, it's not even just the keeping of a standard. It's that if you bring somebody in who's incapable, of meeting, the achievement level, or the criteria for achievement, you bring them into that, they're just going to be frustrated.
Yeah.
And because they are going to be the reason why, and if anything, because they were hired for equality's sake, it's going to be even more difficult, because those employees that are the ones that are able to achieve are going to be upset and frustrated, because they know that the company is choosing to sabotage that, by hiring underqualified people. Because when you talk about the idea of being underqualified, you're not talking about race. You're not talking about gender. When you're talking about being underqualified, what you're talking about is not being able to do the job. And so when you can't do the job, and you've been hired, but you can't do the job, it doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter what your gender is. You can be, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white male, and if you can't achieve, the achievers in the company aren't going to go, oh, it's okay, you're white, you have blonde hair and blue eyes, so it doesn't really matter. We don't mind you being in the company because you're underachieved. No, that won't be the case. There will definitely be equality there. Everybody will want him fired, just like any other gender or just like any other race. They will want him fired or her fired, so that, well, let me just stick with him, because I'm trying to purposely push in that direction of that, the idea is we have too many, white males, that are running the country and running companies. and all that, and that what we need is we need more people of diversity. No, what we need is we need people who can get jobs done.
Yeah.
And if they can get jobs done, that's what we need. And so if we deal with that, and say, okay, fine, we just need to get people to get jobs done. Now we can start addressing other issues, to bring peace. Nobody wants to stay poor, and it doesn't matter, how you came in or lacked in your skill set. When I was in England, because there's especially Northern England, it's changed a lot over the years, but Northern England is predominantly, white English, British males, that are, living in council estates, and have no skill set. And, there's, especially in Liverpool, there's an incredible amount of theft. I don't know if it's still like that, but when I lived there, it was an incredible amount of theft. It got to the point to where I didn't want to buy anything nice anymore because I knew somebody would steal it, break it, trying to steal it. It just would always be the case, that you couldn't.
I'm remembering some of the stories you guys.
Yeah, you couldn't have. I mean, so bizarre. But this isn't a skin color issue. It's not a gender issue. It's an issue that these people have been raised in council estates, and they've dropped out of school. If you want to blame somebody about where they are, blame their parents, because their parents are the ones that are propagating this. But the truth of the matter is their parents are probably propagating it because they've given up on their government giving them opportunity to be able to advance themselves. And so I know I'm kind of going all over the place, and you'll have a hard time trying to nail me down in any particular camp. But the reason is because I'm, because the bottom line is that when it comes to people achieving, there has to be peace. There has to be some sort of an environment where people can advance. And so it's going to mean, yes, there's going to be compromise, but not the bad way compromise or the good way compromise. When I say the good way compromise, I mean getting used to the idea of working for a failing company. I'm not talking about that kind of, but the compromise being you're not going to become the CEO, of a company, based on your skin color and gender. You're going to have to go get skills so that you can do that. And that if you'll be willing to get the skill set, then you can be a help. And so environments where that can be facilitated is very, very important, and that's really the whole point of the church in many ways, is that's the purpose of the church. The church isn't just simply where we come together, on Sundays and Wednesdays and worship God. It's an opportunity, first of all, for people to discover their, not really rediscover, but recapture dignity. Many people have lost dignity. We have people coming into our church all the time with all kinds of addictions and habits and bad resumes, because they've lost dignity, and so they've turned into very angry people, and being able to be saved and to realize you have a clean start, you have a fresh start. And if you'll stop, thinking that way, if you'll stop thinking, poor me, I'm being, marginalized, I didn't have this and I didn't have that and I didn't have the other thing. And just simply, if you stop all that, what God can do in your life is amazing. In the regaining of dignity. And when I got saved, I had literally nothing. I fit my entire existence in my trunk of my car, everything I had. And a friend of mine actually was a great help in making me a minimalist, because we were living together. I was just kind of staying there. He was living there, and he moved and took all my stuff with. And didn't tell me he was moving. He just didn't. I mean, literally in one day he was gone. I was away. I spent a weekend somewhere, came back, and all my stuff was gone. And so, but I had nothing. I had nothing. I had nothing. I had no job.
Does that mean you just didn't buy anything anymore?
Well, I mean, there was no place to put it. So it was like, where are you going to put it? And I'm in my car. I'm staying at friends' houses. I didn't sleep in my car overnight, but I stayed at friends' houses. It was the classic couch surfing. And but when I got saved, God restored my dignity, and my lack of skills was fairly it was fairly easy for me to overcome them simply because I wanted to. It wasn't a thing of where I got some break, or something like that. It was all the hard way. I went in, I got the job. My first job after I got saved was working at 21 years old. I'm working at Burger King with a bunch of 16, 17-year-olds. I'm working at Burger King, and these people are all partying and drinking and living the way that I lived before I became a Christian. And I saw it as an opportunity not to, whine and complain about why do I have to put up with this, but to be able to help them, and to show them what God had done in my life, and that the reason why I was working there was because I was on the road to recovery. This was the first step. It wasn't the last step. This is the first step. And so I've got to get my head back on. And so you know, I've got a bad resume. I've got felony conviction on my that I had to put on my resume, and so I needed to just humble myself. And so whatever job I could get, that's why I got the job at Burger King, is because nobody else would hire me. I was turned down over and over and over and over again. But during all that, uh, you know, I moved in with a bunch of guys. There was 10 of us living in a 5-bedroom house. I was paying $50 a month, beginning, first step. But that wasn't the last step, but I was willing to do these things because I had made a mess of my life. And so, but in doing that, I was able to move forward and to progress. And so that gave me peace within myself. But at the same time, I've never lost that. And so when I run into people that are, in the same kinds of situations that I am, I have compassion on that. And I have an answer, because I think that's the most important thing. Peace really needs to begin inside of you. It's impossible for you to have peace with other people if you aren't at peace within yourself. And I don't mean having peace with yourself. That's not the same thing. Having peace with yourself for many people is just being a raving egomaniac, talking about how great you are, even though you're not, able to do anything. That's not peace. I'm talking about the ability to be able to look at where you are, who you are, what you're doing, and say, okay, this is who I am, and and then deal with that. Okay, this is where I'm at, and I'm going to take full responsibility for getting out of this.
So you mentioned this idea of having the big picture mindset, somebody has the ability to see the big picture,
Mm-hmm.
work from a standpoint of a big picture.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you're talking about how the government has lost that. They don't
Yeah.
see the big
Yeah.
picture. And what's interesting about human nature, and you mentioned as well, the children of Israel choosing a king over God.
Yeah.
And all the dynamics that played out, in the Bible, the accounts of all the mess that was created by that decision, and God allowed it to happen. And said, if this is what you want, fine, but this is how it's going to play out.
Mm.
And what's interesting is in George Washington's farewell address, he says the words, "The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual." And then he goes on to say that naturally leads to somebody who
tyranny,
who basically elevates themselves using their power to self promote. And so it obviously ends in ruin, right?
Yeah.
And so clearly we have a hard time, focusing on what actually brings real peace. The Bible calls, in the New Testament anyway, there's like 5 different accounts where Paul calls God the God of peace.
Mm-hmm.
And that word peace literally means to tie together into a whole. It's taking separate pieces and making them a whole. We've talked about this before, becoming a people when you weren't a people before.
Yeah.
And so how does a person get to a place where they are willing to do the opposite of what the children of Israel did? Okay, God, clearly my life is not going to be at peace because somebody's in office. That's not going to cause peace in my life. There's still going to be issues. how does a person get to a place where they can actually depend on God for that?
How does a person get to a place where they depend on God? That's an interesting question, because it's not, I don't think it's you come to a place where you do this. It's there.
How do you convince people they need that?
Oh, well, that's a whole nother question. That's our job. That's the thing, is just trying to convince people that they need God, in their lives. But for me, the way I go about that is to just try to explain the reality, that, God is supreme. He's all powerful, all knowing. He's, so he's a resource, and that's the real factor. And that is it's very confusing isn't really the right word, but the question that I have is, for people who want to believe in God but not try to gain his resourcefulness in their lives, doesn't make any sense to me. And a good majority of the people, especially in the United States, a good majority of the people claim to believe in God, but yet I think the good majority of people really are deists. They just believe that God is just so not interested in us, that he's somewhere else and doesn't really care about us. But it begs the question, then why? Why did he create all this? And why would he create man if he's not interested in man? And so all those kinds of things, that it's bits and pieces that I don't understand, because they're part of the logic of, if God is real, then, and all those things should be there, and it either he is or he isn't. He's not partially real. There's no such thing as something that is partially real. It's either it's real or it's not real, and it has all the attributes that it claims to have, or it doesn't have all the attributes that it claims to have. There's no in between when it comes to this. And so for the individual that believes in God already, it's a mystery to me why not take it to that next level of trying to access him as a resource in your life.
You think it's an issue of ignorance?
I'd say it's probably more an issue of pride. I think that's more than anything else. It's just simply an unwillingness. It's a funny thing, I've over the years, I'm 62 years old. Over the years of having met lots of people in lots of different cultures and different countries, people do really fall into, not so much into two categories, but sort of fall along a line between pride and humility, and their ability to the ability for them to get along with other people really has everything to do with where they fall along that line between pride and humility. And humble people are very easy to get along with, and are very, very enjoyable to be around.
You gotta clarify what what is humility really?
Do I need to clarify?
You do. I've heard a lot of people talk about humility. It's like,
well, no, they talk about, yeah. Well, I know, but I'm the most humble person you've ever met. That's the
yes.
Yeah, that's
I've actually heard people say I'm so humble.
That's not
like,
that's not somebody because if you were humble, you wouldn't say that. I mean, that's obvious, right? But like people who they are adamant that they don't have a particular negative attribute in their lives. I mean, they're adamant they don't have it, even when other people are telling them they do. That's pride. That's a lack of humility. Because if there are people that say this, it's the old story of, if one person tells you you're a jackass, you can ignore them. But if several people call you a jackass, then you need to buy a saddle. It's the reality, that when you hear things repeated, you have to embrace them. as facts. They're just facts. They're not, people. But it comes from this idea, and it's a fundamental thing that's birthed from pride, is the idea that you know yourself better than other people do, and that's so the opposite of reality. Is that we actually are the last to be informed as to what we are. Everybody else has to suffer our existence. We don't, but everybody else does. And so when other people are intolerant of your existence, well, you should take notice, rather than trying to say, no, it's just everybody else that's got a problem, because you're looking at something that is very clear, that you don't get how life works, and it's going to be impossible to have any kind of peace if you don't know how life works. So humility plays a big role, and it really should be the goal of every human being, to be humble, not just certain human beings, not like, Mother Teresa's and things like that, but everybody, literally everybody should work towards having some level of humility. And, our personalities can make that difficult, because some people don't like certain personalities. And so that I'm not saying that doesn't play into it. But if you have a diverse group of friends and acquaintances, then you should be able to get a good gauge on what kind of person you are. But if all of your friends are exactly like you, and you're all complaining about how the world doesn't like you, well, you got to get out of that echo chamber if you want any kind of peace in your life.
Yeah. So there's a statement here. The chat's not working on that screen, but I have it here anyway. I heard a phrase today: "Pride is not the acknowledgement of our strengths; it's the not acknowledging of our weaknesses."
Yeah, I would say that that's probably true. That there is a reality of that.
There we go.
That because that idea of, everybody tries to rescue their ego by focusing on their strengths. Is you just look away from your weakness. It doesn't even matter what your weaknesses are, or what your strengths are in light of the weaknesses. But when you can't face your own weaknesses, you're going to have a very hard time being humble enough to be at peace, not just with other people, but with yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. It's, what the best gauge, I think personally, the best gauge for how well you're doing in life is how many people are you helping. Not what are you doing, what are you achieving, how many people are you helping, how many people are around you. And for me as a pastor, that's always the desire. I want to see our church grow, not because it's a reflection of my ministry, but because it's, people are being helped, and it's such an important element, and when you start living your life that way, when you start making decisions based on your helping people, you will improve. You'll be able to establish discipline. You want to stop being late to everything. Start worrying about how much, or being concerned with how much your life is influencing and helping other people.
Yeah.
And you will be on time. You will always be on time, because you will be thinking, I do not want my life to have a negative impact on that person that's waiting for me. Mm-hmm. And so, when that becomes the habit of your life, you'll never be late.
Yeah.
Another
question that's come up: do you think people confuse humility with kindness or friendliness?
Well, kindness and friendliness are the real kindness and real friendliness are outgrowths of humility. And I say real because it's very important. You may think you're kind, but other people may not. And you may have deceived yourself in believing that you're kind because you say nice things to people, but the truth is you're just using people. And that's why you say nice things to people. And saying nice things to people sounds like kindness, but you can say nice things to people so that you can get what you want out of them, and so that's not necessarily so.
So let's talk a little bit about the idea of, we'll just say the place of disagreement and how to handle disagreement properly. And obviously this is, human nature is going to bring us to places of disagreement. And so what is the, in the context of talking about the bigger picture, seeing the bigger picture, you mentioned if, the only way that, two people who disagree can have peace is they have to see a better way or agree on a better way.
Yeah.
And so how do you get there? So, not to redo not to re-say what you've already said, but how do you, in a practical application, how do you do that?
Well, you have to see beyond your own personal needs, your own personal wants and desires. And, so the idea
needs and personal wants and desires
all
quite
of it,
different though.
Yeah, well, they are all
because
different.
The second
yes,
you
they
say
are.
Need, it's like
they are all different, but needs, wants, and desires are all benefits for yourself.
Right.
So they all fall into the same category, and your needs, are not, that's not the most important thing.
Right.
There are a lot of things that I do in life that don't meet my needs. Getting up in the morning and coming to prayer meeting doesn't meet my needs. I'd like to sleep longer.
Right.
Working out doesn't meet my needs. I'm in pain all the time. It's not meeting my needs. It's things that have to be done because they have to be done, and it doesn't matter whether or not it meets your own needs. I go out and work out, and I was thinking about it today because I haven't been working out for a while, and I worked out yesterday. I'm in pain today, and thinking, you know what, man, maybe I'm just too old for this. Maybe just forget it. And it's like, no, how about if you don't take a week off anymore? Try to figure out ways that while I'm out of town, when out of the country, how I can still exercise, so I can maintain, a regular exercise regime, so I'm not in pain. It's like, but the point in all that I'm saying is that there are a lot of things in life that we do that, they're not specifically. If you lived your whole life just to meet your own needs, you wouldn't be doing very much.
Yeah.
Because you would have to be spending your whole life, chasing your tail for the most part, because you're not going to meet all your needs, and there's going to be conflicting needs. There's going to be meeting one need. It's going to mean that another need goes without. So,
give me an example of a time where you had a disagreement with somebody, and I feel like I'm asking an interview question right now. When you had a genuine disagreement with somebody, and it was resolved the right way.
Okay. That'll be harder to find because it's there. I have a lot of them that trying to resolve a disagreement that didn't work out. But let's see. See, because you know why I say that is because those are the ones that you remember. You don't remember when you had a disagreement with somebody and you resolved it.
Yeah.
Because that's the goal.
It blows right over.
That's the desire. It's when you don't. That's the frustrating thing. Trying to think of something in particular. Yeah, I'm coming up blank. I don't have any real.
Let me. Maybe this question will trigger something. So, like, maybe give me an example of a time when, maybe something that, let's talk about, something could have worked out much better for an individual, but they were unwilling to do it the right way. You presented the right way, and they were
well.
like,
That's that. Yeah. Well, welcome to pastoring. That's like all the time. And so, what do you want me to do with this information? What was the goal?
The right way was presented,
and they didn't.
And they didn't do it.
And what do you want to know about that? I mean, there's lots. There's lots.
No, just talk. No, my point. So maybe
I would say generally
will kind of lead to something.
Yeah, I would say generally speaking, usually where that comes into play is more often than not is when somebody becomes a Christian And which always happens is something from their past comes up, and they want to try to capture that in their new life, and it's not a good idea. And that's a, so trying to present that understanding that there are things in our lives that, like when I became a Christian, 21, it's, the prime of life, and it's no surprise to me looking backwards, but at the time I didn't understand it. It was all of a sudden friends who I hadn't seen for years, girlfriends out of the blue. I mean, people that I'm, it's funny. My wife, I was married actually, and there was a girl that I got in contact with. I'm not even sure how we got in contact. It had to be from her side because I wasn't trying. But it was like somebody who lived in a, so it was somebody I knew when I was like 16 and had met at a holiday resort, and we lived in different cities. And so we only saw each other like two or three times in our whole lives. So why in the world she was even trying to find me? But bad idea. I'm married. It's a bad idea for me to try to, work up some relationship with some old girlfriend. And, but people run into those kinds of things, and they got to have it. It's like, no, maybe this can work. I'm not talking about necessarily married, but some old girlfriend comes along, and now, there's a, oh, if I can only get her saved, and then we can get married and live happily ever after. And it's like, that doesn't, no, that very rarely happens. As a matter of fact, I've not seen it happen, where you plan to get somebody saved so that you can marry them, and it actually works out. I've never, ever seen that, and so I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure where you want to go with this information, but
I'm trying to get you. I'm trying to trigger you on just thinking about circumstances. To be honest with you, I have to kind of backtrack because I didn't really consider the fact that you're a pastor and we're doing a podcast for people you pastor, so, and people who you have pastored who maybe have gone on the wrong side of this whole thing might watch this at some point. But not.
Well,
I'm not trying to
yeah,
get you to blast somebody. That wasn't my
that's
purpose.
fine. Yeah, that's fine. I that's fine. There's been recent history of someone that, to this day, here 30 years later, is still talking about what a horrible pastor I was for them. I haven't pastored them for 20 years. And they're still talking about what a horrible pastor I was. And the reason is because they were unwilling to deal with themselves. Not only, I mean, to the point. So there's like, for our fellowship in particular, over the years, there's been these hate sites that have sprung up, and literally the members of these sites have been members for like 20, 30 years. And all they do is just constantly report everything negative that's going on around the world in our fellowship. And see, that's why I left. And it's like, so what, you're not going to move on? You're not going to become something. You're just going to live there. And that, the truth is, that's what happens is when you're unwilling to deal with issues, and to make peace, as it were, your whole life is in turmoil. You live a life of turmoil. This one particular individual is probably in their 50s by now, and still living in their car, 50 years old. And the sad part is he was married to a millionaire. He was married to a millionaire, and he couldn't stop. I'm going to say all this because nobody knows who he is, but he couldn't stop pornography. He just wouldn't. He just wouldn't. I'm constantly dealing with him. His wife is, I'm catching him all the time in weird situations, and he's by himself with a magazine, and it's like, I'm your wife, what's up with this? And just horribly, horribly addicted, and tried to talk to him, tried to talk to him, tried to talk to him, tried to talk to him. And all he could do was just badmouth his wife. That's all he knows how to do, is badmouth his wife. And so to this very day now, he's still badmouthing his wife. And yet he cannot handle himself, but he was married to a millionaire. And
they're no longer together.
And they're no longer, no, they're divorced. And she even paid him off to get the divorce. She didn't pay him a lot, but she paid him off, and he spent all that.
Wow.
I mean, he just, how can you decide, that this is what you are? Can you look in the mirror and see the L on your forehead? But it's because he was unwilling to deal with these issues in his own life. It wasn't because the pornography was a deeper issue. That was only that was a surface issue. The deeper issue is that he just was unwilling to recognize when that he's not who he thinks he is. And so he's unwilling. He was a person not at peace with himself. Switched churches. He's been in several of our fellowship churches, finally left the fellowship altogether. And he's a great example of somebody who has no peace, and so he's going to live his entire life bad-mouthing as many people publicly that he possibly can, because he has no peace within himself. And, it's tragic, to see that kind of thing. But it happens. People are like that. People do things like that. It's one of the things about being a pastor. And I'm often talking about, don't think that just because you see people and they have money or they have things or, they have some kind of external facade that they're at peace and they're happy. That because there's a lot more to peace than just how much money you have. Mm-hmm. It goes deeper than that. You have to be at peace with yourself, which, like I said earlier, that means you have to be able to look in the mirror and admit who you are, mm-hmm. If you're going to go anywhere.
So I have a funny story, and then I have a follow-up question. So I remember this time when I was a kid. I was a good friend of mine, actually. We had a disagreement. And you mean him, had a disagreement.
Oh, another person.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was, it was kind of late at night. We were out. It was a stupid disagreement as well. And, we're teenagers, of course, it's a stupid disagreement, but it's like nothing earth shattering, nothing consequential, nothing big. It was really, really a stupid thing. And it turned into a massive fist fight between us. And so we were at a park at the time, and I had left a bunch of my stuff at his house. So I start, walking to his house to get my stuff. And I walk in the back door. He runs to his house to try and beat me, runs inside, grabs a kitchen knife, runs outside as I'm leaving. And I just happened to have this, don't ask me why, I had a big piece of PVC pipe that I was taking home with me. And he jumps out literally jumps off the stairs with this massive kitchen knife and just charges me with it. And so now we both have weapons.
Yeah.
And I go to grab my weapon, and the guy who was with me ran away. So the weapon slipped out of my hand. He had it in his hands. And so I was weaponless. This guy had a weapon. Long story short, he ends up slicing me, and neighbors are coming out. It's kind of a scene. His mom comes out. It's just a massive scene. There's blood all over the sidewalk, and it's like, he just sliced my hand real good. It wasn't like he didn't stab me or anything. But so he ends up calming down for long enough for me to just leave. And so I leave. No cops were called, and his mom comes and picks me up and comes back. She says, "Hey, he wants to talk to you. Please just go talk to him." So, this is all just a bunch of drama. I go back to his house. He apologizes. I apologize to him, and he's got ice on his head. I've got blood leaking from my hand, and it's just a ridiculous scene. And we've been friends ever since. It's like like in that moment we were able to just, "Hey, I'm sorry. That was stupid." It got really super dramatic, but the reason why I share that is because it really is quite natural when we're in a disagreement, when people are in disagreement. Maybe it's not common, but it is part of our human nature to want to draw our weapons and fight. Yeah. And until you come to my side or submit or die, whatever I got to do to make it my way. But then there's this phrase that people have probably heard called burying the hatchet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the point of that, the phrase comes from an old Indian tradition. If there was a peace treaty between two tribes or between two warring factions, where they would literally come together, they would dig a hole and they would bury weapons in the ground, and that would be a symbol of their now peace. We're not bringing our weapons out anymore. And so my follow-up question after all that is mainly just for entertainment value. That's why I shared that. But just the idea that how naturally it is for us to pull our weapons or have our weapons ready.
Yeah.
How do you recommend people? What are some practical ways to keep from drawing weapons?
Well, if you think about your own situation, like you said, it was stupid. The argument was stupid. And so what happens is it's no longer about some point that's being made. Mm-hmm. It's simply, somebody backing down, saying, I was wrong, and so that's what you're fighting for is you say you're wrong or I'm going to beat you. And no, you say you're wrong, I'm going to beat you. and it just escalates from there. And the issue is it's not, in any kind of conflict, the idea, if you're going to resolve the conflict, you have to come to a place where it's not about being wrong anymore. It's about how can we fix this, and that's
fix what though?
Whatever the conflict is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Whatever the conflict is, there's been conflicts that I've had with people over the years, almost without exception, when I have not been able to resolve a conflict with somebody, within the church, and they end up leaving the church, it's because they were unwilling to change their opinion. It remained, I will stay in the church if you admit you're wrong. Otherwise, I'm leaving. It was never, okay, can we get past this? Can we get beyond this? And there's been times where I've literally said, okay, what's the way forward? I've tried to do this, that, and the other thing, tried to explain, the reasoning behind certain things, and you don't agree with that. You don't believe that those are the reasons. You think you're being lied to. You think you're being taken advantage of. You think you're being manipulated. Whatever the situation is, what can be done to get past this? And usually in that kind of circumstance, there isn't anything. Because the only way past it is a 100% admission of fault on the behalf of the other individual. And there's never such situation where it's 100% the fault of somebody else. It's always mutual. And because it's mutual, and you're unwilling to utilize the opportunity, especially when, what can we do to move forward from this? It's not a question of compromising, from the standpoint of, okay, I'm just going to, I'll just say I'm sorry, and it'll all be over with. Because the issue is not I'm sorry. The issue is I want you to be different. I want what I perceive to be the case to stop, And so saying I'm sorry is not going to be enough, because that won't change perceptions. Mm-hmm. They'll still see everything as being the same, because it's not just an apology. It's I want life to work like this, and when you determine that that's how things have to be, you're never going to be able to make peace in that kind of an environment. There's just no way you can make peace in that kind of an environment. You have to find a way forward between those who are in conflict. There has to be a way forward, which is what happened. I mean, even though you were teenagers, it would happen. He's after you, but so he makes the first move, which is great. And probably, help from his mom, I imagine. But she went and got you, so she's playing peacemaker. Mm-hmm. Which the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. And so she's playing peacemaker. She's not just telling him he needs to be sorry. She wants you to come over so that you guys can face to face go forward from there. And like you said, that's exactly what happened. And that is how it has to happen, you can't hang on to your position, which usually, and that's, it's true in marriage as well, is that you really, after you've been married for a while, that's a sad fact is why, so many people get divorced too early, that if they just hang around long enough, to where they actually get a brain, it takes a while for a brain to develop in marriage. And so, but you start to develop a brain and you start to realize, because I always wondered, older people get along.
Yes.
even when they don't get along.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But they get along. The classic is the overbearing wife and the passive husband. No, not overbearing wife and passive husband. It's a man who's got wisdom.
Yeah.
And he's realized, you know what, I'm not going to fight with her over this.
Yeah.
Because it's not a question of whether I'm going to win or not. It's a question of, once I've won, what have I won? I haven't won anything.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to lose, or not fight at all, and there's a lot of times like that, in a marriage relationship that, for me as the man, because I'm in charge, you need to do what I say. Well, but what about when they don't? What about what are you going to do? Are you going to assert your rightful place? And what are you going to get when that's all said and done? At the very best, you're gonna have a wife that's scared to death of you. That's at the very best. Yeah. All you're gonna have, which is that really worth, having? Or learn how to just, okay. All right, this is the way it is. This is the way things are. Why fight? Why fight over this? For me personally, over the years, what I have learned in being able to make peace in my home is that there are things that are okay with my wife that are not okay with me. I mean, that are pure not okay. They're just absolutely not okay. Never in a million years would I ever allow that to be my thinking. But for her, it's quite fine. And it's like, and to learn how to just, you know what? This isn't about me. Because it used to be, if you'll listen to me, you can have a better life. If you listen to me, I can improve you. I can help you to experience things that you couldn't experience. It's a great life. Trust me. If you were able to live inside this brain, you'd never live inside that one again. And I realized, you know what? That's just it's not worth it. It's not worth it to try to do that. The truth of the matter is that it works for me in my brain because my brain is my brain, and people think differently. And so what I think is the right way to do things, because of my personality and because of my character, my aggressiveness, all those attributes of who I am, my thinking works for me, but take that same thinking and put it in somebody that they don't have those same attributes. They've got a whole different set of attributes. It may not work the same way. For me, I don't care, when I make a stand about something and people will oppose me, I'm okay with that. My wife, she doesn't like that at all. She would much rather change her position than to have people not like her. And I'd much rather change my people, than my position. And so, there's two totally different personalities. Which one's right? Which one's right?
Yeah.
Somebody who likes to, is what's the Bible word for it? Being afraid of their faces, and what's the word though? I can't remember. It's not coming to me for some reason. Or to be somebody who doesn't, who can have, harden their heart against people, which is the better way to be, passive and people pleasing. That's the word I was looking for. What's better, to be a people pleaser, or to be, like me and say, hey, you know what, my way or the highway. You don't like how I am, then go find somebody else. Yeah. Which one's better? Which one is better? And there's no better. It's just different. Neither one of them is better, and they can both be looked at as being negative things, but they're part of who we are. Yeah. And they help us to cope, with things in life. And so my thinking's not necessarily the best for my wife. And so I learned, hey, if I want to have peace in my home, stop telling my wife if she thought the way I thought, she'd be a better person, you know. And even though my motivation is in her best interests, it's in her best interest based on if she became like me,
Yeah.
you know, not if she was, who she is, becoming a better her. It's about throwing that away. Throw away who you are and be like me because I'm a better. You know, that's all there is to it. You know, and you know, it took many years for me to get that in my thinking. And now we have peace.
So peace clearly is possible.
Yes, even in conflict. And,
Yeah.
and again, like I said, it's not compromise. I think that's an important thing to understand. Is peace is not it's not necessary in order to have peace to compromise. You have to see what is best. What is the best thing for those that are in conflict with each other? What is the best for both of them in this
I think
conflict?
reason is probably the right word, to be reasonable.
Well, it's not even just being reasonable because you have to, you know, reason may be different for different people as well. You know, something
But
that's
if you're
reasonable.
thinking about something that's like you said, a better
The
idea, or
idea
what's
is
the
just
goal?
it's a higher good, you know.
Yeah.
Like I said, you have to zoom out. You know, that's been something I'd say for the last probably 5 years has been like my mantra. You know, zoom out, zoom out. People are talking to me, oh, I've got this, zoom out. You're too close. You know, when you're too close, you don't see things properly. You've got to zoom out.
Yeah.
And so you got to see the big picture.
Yeah. Very cool. That's it for tonight. We're glad you joined us, and thanks for the questions, comments. Oh, sorry. I missed that last one. You know, I'm not even going to say anything. Our last question here, but if you don't address things, how do you keep from becoming resentful or apathetic?
Well, it's a great question, but you have to ask yourself and you have to be honest. When you're talking about addressing things, are you talking about being right? That's really you have to addressing things is not necessarily addressing things. Sometimes it's just listen. We'll be done with this conversation when you tell me I'm right. Okay. You know, and that's not addressing things, you know. And so have you thought it through? Have you thought about the other person? Have you thought about where that conflict is coming from? Have you worked through all the issues of how can you accommodate, you know, this other in this conflict, to accommodate the other person's position in order to have peace? You know, because that is many times addressing the issue. You know, addressing the issue is not making the other person agree with you. You know, that's not addressing the issue. And so I think you have to look at that. You have to ask yourself the question, what do you mean when you say addressing the issue? If you really mean bringing a resolution that is acceptable to both parties, yes, but you don't have to do that by talking about it. Sometimes it's just like, are you good? I'm good. Everything's good. Yeah. Okay, great. We're done. It's addressed. It's done. Now, if you walk away and you're lying and you have resentment and you want them to tell you they're sorry and you want this and that and the other thing, then you haven't addressed the issue because you're the problem. You know, and so when you address the real issue, which is you, you know, then you'll find peace. But that other person doesn't even need to be in the room when you do that. So.
Very cool. Okay, now we're done. No more questions are in, so we're clear. Sorry about almost missing that, but we'll be here again next week, and we want to invite you, if you haven't been to one of our midweek services, we really do invite you to come join us in person tomorrow night, 7:00 it starts. If you haven't been in a while, invite you back. We'd love to see you and meet you in person if you've never been. We will be here at the address that'll be on your screen in a second here, but thanks again for the questions. Thanks for joining, and again, we'll see you next week.